Hi, my name's Lee Jasper. This is Brixton, London, and you're watching Lee Jasper Drive Time.
Good morning and welcome to Lee Jasper Drive Time on what is a gloriously summer's day, even in the context of lockdown here in London. Welcome to all our listeners and viewers on YouTube and on Facebook. Do share the program with your friends and colleagues and let them know that we're on live today. And today we've got a very special program. It's focusing on domestic violence as it affects the African and Caribbean communities. And I want to make a direct appeal really to our black men. I don't think we're in this debate enough. I don't think we're doing enough to challenge other men when they talk about domestic violence. I don't think that we're doing enough to support our sisters who find themselves tragically and sometimes horrendously dying, maimed, scarred, and our children traumatized by the violence that is inflicted by us. Sometimes not all physical. Sometimes it's mental, it's coercive, and I just don't think that we're doing enough. When I've challenged people who are domestic violence abusers online, and some of them are in the public space pretending to be community leaders, I've received a tremendous backlash by other men telling me we shouldn't be calling out the brothers, we shouldn't be doing this publicly, and so on. Well, we've worked very hard to talk to people who are domestic violence abusers to stop their behavior. And only when they've refused to listen do I go the extra mile in calling them out. I'm not going to do that today because that would dominate the program to an excessive extent. But I'm being committed to doing that where I find information that those people are out there. But today we've got an absolutely fantastic show. But I want to just give you some heads up about the issue of domestic violence. Of course, it remains a sort of family secret within black communities. And it can be an abuse that is perpetrated not just by partners and ex-partners and husbands, but extended family members. And it can include the physical abuse, it can include forced marriage, even female genital mutilation on our African communities. And it's all part of that mix. So partners, ex-partners, family members, husbands, extended family members and children, particularly children, are all in that mix. Migrant women, those without papers, are particularly vulnerable, particularly when it can lead to modern day slavery. And we've all seen, haven't we, some of those stories that we've seen by the media of people who are subject to that. Emotional abuse, coercive control, physical abuse, sometimes targeting pregnant women. When women become pregnant, they are particularly vulnerable to this sort of abuse. And a 2015 report by the London's Black Women Project found that 733 black women sought refuge spaces in London, yet only 154 were successful in accessing them. And we all know that since then, even more of these refugees have closed. So where is their sister supposed to go when she's facing this kind of threat, intimidation, and sometimes violence within her home? Between 2013 and 2016, the Metropolitan Police Service website reporting on London found that 10,000, on average, 10,000 black women a year, African and Caribbean women and mixed ethnicity women, 10,000 a year between 2013 and 16 were domestic violence victims. And last year, according to the Mayor's office in London, 24% of DV perpetrators were black men, with the vast majority of those between the ages of 25 and 44. And on a report on the BBC published last year, 173 people were killed in domestic violence-related homicides, according to the data from 43 police forces across the UK. And that was an increase of 32 on the previous year. If you go on the government website, ONS, Office of National Statistics, it will show 3.5% of black men report themselves being victims of domestic violence. Well, that's contrasted with 10.4% of African women and 7.1% of Caribbean women. And get this, 18.7% of mixed ethnicity, Black, African and Caribbean women reported being victims. So yes, men are victims, but they remain the overwhelmingly small minority in what is, those statistics show us, is an overwhelming majority of Black women victims. And the number of those who are being murdered by their ex-partners is rising, up from 27%, according to the Office of National Statistics last year. And of course, COVID-19 is putting incredible pressure on individual families as they're forced to stay in lockdown with often an abusive partner, and the emotional trauma and stresses within the home are being made real, and it's women and children who are carrying that burden. There was a report from international non-government organisation Sisters for Change in partnership with the Manchester Mayor Project that warned that institutional racism and sexism in Greater Manchester was affecting the way that Black women access services. They found that local authorities failed to take into account religious and cultural needs, that were failing to provide suitable accommodation to women and their children made homeless following domestic abuse, and that police and housing authorities had failed to respond adequately to religious hate crimes, that health and social services failed to adequately safeguard BME women and children. I know of a case, you may know of the case of Christopher Capassa, and I'll tell you more about that later. But there's also cases of local authorities failing to take measures to protect BME and migrant victims of domestic abuse, and routine failure really to provide
you're back.
for women with limited or no understanding of English. Organizations who are supportive are Sister Space over in Hackney. Hi, Sister Space. I'm going to have you on our program. We need to hear your voice on these matters, and it's not just a one-off, so we'll be coming back to it. Black Thrive, always give them space, because as a Black mental health institution, this is an important issue for them. And Women's Aid. All you can find their support and information on the website. I just also want to say something about the women who've lost their lives and mention a few names. Look them up, because their cases are each horrific, and I've read them this morning. Charlotte Huggins, New Year's Day 2009. Simbo Arethia Mula, 39, a nurse, I think over from Romford. Lala Kamara, murdered by somebody she took in off the street at 26 years old. She sought to give him refuge and help. Well, today I'm joined by a whole galaxy of powerful Black women, some of whom are domestic violence survivors. And I'm co-hosting today with the wonderful Jenny Steele. Now, Jenny is a mother. She's an author. She's a director and facilitator of the Yana Community Interest Company. She's the national ambassador for domestic violence. This is a woman with passion and a purpose. She understands the true meaning of overcoming adversity. And trust me, I've witnessed her use her life to make a difference in this world to those who suffer domestic violence. This is a woman who lives her life loud, and I love strong, dynamic Black women. So I'm going to bring in the dynamic, the beautiful, and the ubiquitous Miss Jenny Steele. Welcome to Lee Jasper Drive.
Morning. Morning. Thanks so much for having me, Lee. Really appreciate the opportunity, and especially in this time as well.
Well, you know, we're delighted to have you, and we're increasingly using the platform here to provide a greater platform for the kind of issues that we're talking about. Domestic violence, particularly within COVID, is something that we need to talk about. Tell me, Jenny, are you impressed with Black men's response to the issue of domestic violence?
Do you know what? To be honest, I get a lot of support from the community.
Well, we've lost Jenny there for a little, but she's back with us.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, do say that again.
I do feel like the conversation is being had a lot more, not enough,
yeah,
obviously, as you said, but I do, and my organisation does get a lot of support from other Black males within the community, and also youth workers, you know, other male-run organisations. So I do think that it's slightly changing, but it's not changing enough.
So you think generationally then, Jenny, there's a change in the younger, because I see that amongst my boys. This is a generation where we've managed to break the chain, and those young men are much more alive, emotionally intelligent and sensitive to the issue. So you see that as part of that generational change? We're losing Jenny.
Can you ask that question again?
Yeah, I'm just saying. So, do you see this part of the intergenerational change with younger Black men being more intelligent, more emotionally intelligent?
I think so, but I also feel that there's a lot more other Black males working with young Black males to bring. Can you hear me, Lee?
Yeah, I'm afraid that your line is very choppy. So you're freezing on the line. So I'm not quite sure what that's about. But let's see what we can do about that. So do bear with us out there. It's live TV, and with the bugs in the system, you may see me freeze. You may see Jenny freeze. If our contributors see the two co-hosts freeze, please feel free to jump in and take over the show until we get back, because it's live TV and these things happen. So bear with us, my friend. Now, can we just say before we start, Jenny, and you introduce the fabulous range of guests, for those of you watching online, you know, we don't get this debate aired enough. Jenny's right. More people are talking about it. More Black men are talking about it. Certainly Black women have been talking about it and not being heard for an age. But do share, do get online and say, look, tune into this debate now. Yes, you can dip back in and watch it later, but we'd really love to get you commented and engaged in the show. And by that, you know, I always say every Saturday, this is news you can use. So if you're out there and you know, I know a website, I know a book, I know a film, I know an organization that can provide assistance to people who may be suffering domestic violence, both men and women, because we've already made that nuanced distinction, then put it in and we'll put it on screen so that this is an empowering news show and people can access and get signposted to the help that we need. So my name's Lee Jasper. This is Lee Jasper Drive Time. Now I'm going to hand over to Jenny to host the show. I'll come in if she freezes, and if I freeze, it's anybody's guess. We'll take it from there. Over to you, Jenny.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. What a great opportunity to have this conversation. And as Lee said, it'll be if there's work that you're doing with young people that we haven't mentioned, or even women or men, please jump on, give us a lot of give us that got a extraordinary amount of knowledge and expertise about to come onto the show. So I'm going to start by introducing Alison J. I'll tell you a little bit about Alison because I know she's got a big story to tell. Morning, Alison. Morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Morning. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I think Jenny's frozen, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Alison J. I am fortunately a survivor of domestic abuse. So my story goes deeper than just myself. It started with my mother was the victim of a rape. That's how she got pregnant with me. So to Lee's point about the perpetrators could be family or extended family, the perpetrator of this was actually my mother's aunt's partner. So if you can make that out with the whole genealogy. So she had to go to visit her aunt in South London. She lived in Northwest London at the time. got there, the aunt's partner answered the door, started to make unwanted advances towards my mother, fought her, overpowered her, raped her, and then my mother fell pregnant with myself. Unfortunately, she was not supported by a family. It was more a case of how she could get pregnant for him, offering her an abortion, all sorts of things, rather than actually addressing the issue. So you can imagine that caused tensions within the family. My mother kind of distanced herself from the family and pretty much raised me by herself with the help of some friends that she had close to where she lived. Fast forward to my own experience, it was the first time I had encountered domestic abuse, was with a partner that I had met when I was 21 years old. Very green, I was fresh out of church, met this amazing businessman, so charming and charismatic. And he charmed me, he wined me, he dined me, all the things that a girl could want, especially a young girl could want. And then fast forward about maybe a year into the relationship, I noticed changes in him. But by that time, I was completely smitten, so absolutely in love with him. And so it didn't feel like the control and the manipulation that it actually was. One by one, my friends were no longer coming round. My friends were no longer calling. I wasn't going out with my friends because it would be a case of there was always something he would want to do all of a sudden when I wanted to go out with my friends. So, and then I got to find out that when I thought I was his actual girlfriend, I was the side chick. But again, the control and the manipulation was such that I lived in denial of it. I didn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it because this was my man. I was in love after all. I was young. I was just I was about 22 at this point. And for the most part, the main experiences I had had in relationship, or the deep committed relationship, was with this man. So, and then I got to, after a while, I thought I can't do this because the behavior had started to change where I could no longer deny that I was the other woman, because he started to be more comfortable with me and displaying his behavior. So, because prime example, the thing that really did it for me was there was one day his phone rang. So he went by the radio, turned the radio on to make it sound like he was in his car driving. Before, he would never do something like that. And it was really driving the point home that this man was controlling me. He was manipulating me. He had a whole nother life. So I put him out. He came back and says, "It's me and you, babe. I love you. Just give me a few weeks to sort it out." I said, okay. He wanted to stay. I told him he can sleep on the couch. Next thing I know, he's in my bed. I'm thinking, okay, just go to sleep. He starts making advances, unwelcomed, and I try to fight him off. And I try as I might. And now I am quite a small woman. At that time, I was like a size 8. And he's big, 6'2" guy, trained, worked out all the time. And I fought and I fought. He overpowered me, and then he raped me. After that, he hissed in my ear, "Don't let me have to rape you for it again." But then again, going back to the control, it was and the control and the manipulation was so deep set and so deep rooted by that time, because by this time we'd been together 4 years, that I still didn't leave. I felt like I couldn't leave. I felt like I couldn't go anywhere. Like I couldn't see my life or anything without him in it. And the control.
Did you have any support around you, Alison?
I didn't tell anyone, because it was one of those things where, unfortunately, leading up to this point in my life, this wasn't the first time I had experienced abuse. I had actually been abused as a child. And then I was at the age of 15, I was raped by my best friend's father. So I had learned to suppress and keep everything hidden and bottled up and not speak. Because many of my friends will tell you it's only as I've gotten older that I've become more open, more vocal, and started to share. But before, I would not speak. I've been on antidepressants. I've had a failed suicide attempt, thank God, because it was one of those things where I was carrying the burden of it all by myself, and I was young. I was in my I hadn't even reached my mid-20s at that point, having been, and by that point in my life, I had been, like I said, abused by my best friend's dad, now by somebody that I had trusted and loved implicitly, would have done anything for. And it was just years and years of control, manipulation. And it wasn't until even a couple of years after that that I actually had the strength to say, this isn't it for me. This cannot be my life.
Yeah.
I there has to be more, there has to be better. And the behavior that he kept exhibiting, fortunately, it wasn't any physical violence in the sense of he hit me or beat me or anything like that. But the mental abuse and control, which then led to the sexual abuse of him raping me, was something that I felt I couldn't escape, and I didn't even recognize it until I had become older. So that's pretty much my story in a nutshell, with the main parts of my experience with domestic abuse and domestic violence.
Sorry, Alison, you cut out there for me. Can you just repeat that again? Because I wanted to ask you a question, but I don't want to ask it not at the right time, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'm sorry. What was the last thing you heard?
So what I wanted to ask you is, looking back now, what do you think your family as a support system could have done, or you felt that if they could have supported you somehow, what would that have looked like?
Well, the sad part about it is, I didn't actually learn about my mother being the victim of abuse until I was almost 30 years old. I didn't know that my mother got pregnant with me as a result of a rape until I was almost 30. So if I had known that earlier, then absolutely I could have gone to my mother, my members of my family, and got and sought support and help then. But because I actually believed I was the only person to ever have gone through it, the shame, because it was almost like I could hear in my head people saying, how could you let that happen to yourself? Why didn't you leave him? Why? And it just felt like I was at fault. It was my fault. It was my responsibility because I let it happen, not realizing and not knowing at that time there's a whole host of women that go through that. Because I have family members that unfortunately have gone through physical domestic abuse where they've had bones broken and things like that. But I didn't know. And Lee's point about the extended family and not talking and not sharing, for the most part, pretty much every single person I know that has gone through some form of abuse, it has been by somebody either in the family or a part of the extended family.
Yeah. Wow, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, obviously for you now, you've gone on to do coaching. So tell us a little bit about the coaching that you do, because it's for teenagers, women. It also includes men.
So it's quite funny because the way that I got into coaching was I heard an ad on Choice FM back when Choice FM existed. I had heard an ad for mentoring, and I didn't really pay it any mind until a friend of mine said to me, you are a role model for my daughter. And I'm thinking, me, what have I didn't see myself as that, because of everything I had been through, I didn't see myself as worthy of being able to be a role model. So I signed up for it. It was for the Borough of Brent at the time. I signed up for it, and I got involved with children that were craving guidance. They were craving that adult interaction, somebody to care about them and care about what they're going through. So that's how I got involved in mentoring. So then I went on to study and become get qualifications and certifications in becoming a coach, a stress therapist, a stress management therapist, a life coach, a coach, and so on. And then I've noticed that with my help with the teenagers, some of their parents would then see the work I was doing with them and come to me and want some help. And then I noticed that there are men that are single fathers would see the work I was doing with their children and come to me. And it was something that I realized that there is this real need here, and we need as a community to speak about this, because I spoke at a conference at the end of last year, and in my workshop was a mother, her daughter, and her granddaughter. And at the end of it, she came to me and she said, I have to go home and speak to my son because he doesn't know what he doesn't know. Now, I didn't push and probe to find out what that was. And that just made me, and then, speaking to her on a one-on-one made me realize that we do really, in our community, we need that support. And hence me really pushing my coaching and stress management therapy, because we need this. And I'm grateful that I'm able to use the experiences that I have to help others, because there's many times people want that connection and they want to be able to know that you know how they're feeling. It's not just for some people, they don't want you to just come to them with book knowledge. They want you to come to them from a place of understanding and empathy, because you have walked that walk. And that is the main reason that really drives me to coaching.
Sorry,
I've been doing that for like 24 years now.
Sorry, Alison. Anyone who is waiting to come in as a guest, if you are, can you mute your mic, please, because we can hear some typing. It's not myself, so if you are waiting to come on as a guest, please can you mute yourself? Thank you very much. Alison, I definitely agree with you. As someone who works with, so my organisation works with young people aged from 11 up to 18, and I do feel like it's not just that. They want to hear your experience, because they want to have, there's a bag of questions that young people want to ask. And if we're going to go from the book, we're not going to ask those questions honestly and authentically.
And that's one of the reasons why I felt that I was led to write my book. It's my life up until the age of 29. And it puts those experiences in there. And to be honest with you, it was a challenge for me to write. I didn't even write it under my own name, because I was still afraid, and I still carried some of that element of that shame with me. But in writing the books, people have come to me and wanted help. And for some people, that's the first time they've been able to share and open up. My mother, for example, even though I found out that she was raped at the age of 19 and got pregnant with me, for the last year, 2019, was the first time that my mother actually ever said out loud, I am the survivor of domestic abuse. Because she just never had that to be able to say.
I was going to ask you about the relationship between you and your mum.
Oh my gosh, growing up, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. But again, it wasn't until I found out how she got pregnant with me that I started to understand my mother, not as mummy, but as the woman. Because by the time I found out, I'd already gone through abuse myself. So I was actually able to really help understand my mother's journey, and it's helped to build our relationship. And we have the most amazing relationship now. My mother is the first person that I go to if I'm going through anything, regardless of what it is. And it's because we have been able to be open with each other and talk about this.
Yeah. And I think also, I just saw a comment flashed up at the bottom. I'm going to try and catch it again, but it talks about learned behavior, which I talk a lot about. Here it is here. There's a comment here that it's not in your DNA, it's learned behavior that passes from generation to generation. And that's something that we work towards a lot as an organization. I was going to ask you, what work are you guys doing, or have you started doing any work around breaking cycles, family cycles?
Benny's frozen again. So the work that myself personally have done with breaking family cycles is education, in the sense of letting the men in my family know that you have, for the most part, most of the men in my family have daughters. You have daughters. How would you feel if your daughter was coming to you saying that he beat me, he raped me, he did whatever? How would you feel if your daughter was that person? How would you feel if you had to be bailing your son out of prison because he hit somebody, he raped somebody? How would you feel? Well, if you wouldn't want that for your children, don't do it. And it's really reinforcing that point, that what you don't want to see in the next generations, you can't be doing that in your own life, because children don't do as they're told, they do as they see. So that is one of the things that I use to try to break the cycles of it in my own family.
Yeah, because the thing about cycles is there's so many cycles, right? I mean, I talk to some of my young people and I'm like, going to university for the first time, the first doctor, the first person to drive, the first lawyer in the family. There's so many cycles that we do need to work on, and some of them are really hard to deal with as a family, because I don't know about yourself, but my own teen experience with an unhealthy relationship, again, it's like, who do you talk to within the family? Because we also go through this thing within our culture of what happens in the home stays in the home.
And it's funny you should say that, Jenny, because last year there was an incident in my family where one of my cousins, she had a really bad psychotic breakdown because she was going through post-traumatic stress disorder, remembering a time that she was abused by her grandfather, sexually abused by her grandfather when she was 7. And I remember and as a result, it impacted my mom. And so my mom ended up in hospital for almost a week as a result, because she was violently attacked when the young lady had this psychotic break. And in telling other family members, one of a family member actually said, so you can't do something to keep it quiet? And I'm thinking, hold on a second, we are in 2019 and that is still the mentality? And then in speaking to somebody, they're like, well, you have to see with him because he's a different generation. That doesn't excuse it, because you have daughters, you have granddaughters, you have great granddaughters now. That doesn't excuse that you're a different generation. What that says to me is that you actually need to no longer have that kind of, we don't speak about it, we ignore it, nobody addresses that big elephant in the corner of the room. That's what that says to me, is you're still living in that time. And to be honest with you, that is dangerous, because that can cause the life and health of not just women, but of men, because women aren't the only ones that are the victims of domestic abuse. This is unhealthy and it is not safe.
Definitely. And I think on that point of us talking about holding things within our family, within our community, it's a big thing that we do. When it comes to abuse, domestic abuse, whether it be sexual abuse, we do tend to hold it in our family as a community and deal with it differently. So on that note, I'm going to bring in Nana Otu Oyeti MBE, who is the Executive Director Women's Rights Organisation in the UK. Are you there, Nana?
Hi, everybody. My name is Nana Otu Oyote, and I work with Forward. And it's been really exciting hearing Alison talking about her journey. My journey is really talking about the work we do. We're an African women led organization, and our focus has primarily been on tackling female genital mutilation, which is another major form of violence against women and girls. And really listening to the stories about men. Very often, men seems to be outside conversations around these issues. But the challenge has also been that a lot of women are doing it for men. So if the abuse is not done for men, it's done by men. So there are a lot of issues around domestic abuse and violence against women that we all need to sort of really, really understand. One of the things that has really been very, very worrying about our work has been very often when you start talking about FGM, which is basically, I mean, I'm not going to go into details, but it's really harmful practice which requires removing parts of the female genitalia purposely to, stop women from being sexually active. There are so many issues around that. But in terms of domestic violence, we're actually seeing that some of the women experience FGM, experience early marriage and forced marriage, and also experience domestic violence. And so we are seeing that women coming with multiple forms of abuse. And very often the approach in tackling these forms of abuse is only to look at one form of abuse. And we are repeatedly seeing women coming with multiple forms of abuse. And as COVID has really come up, we're seeing that women who have experienced all these forms of abuses don't have anywhere to go. And one of the worrying things that we're also seeing is that it's also an issue that affects younger women. So the issue of age, we're seeing young women who come from, again, BME communities, and we're seeing that there are challenges even around the law itself. So the law is really looking at how do we safeguard people who are affected. But you cannot.
I was going to ask you, Nana. Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to ask you around what is the law around FGM in the UK for people that are locked in and listening who are just learning about FGM possibly in depth for the first time. What is the law in the UK around FGM as a practice?
As a practice, the UK law really forbids any form of female genital mutilation being practiced in the UK. And if you are a UK citizen or a UK permanent resident, you're also forbidden from taking your child outside the country to have it done. So if you do have it done, you are going to be prosecuted. So you, the family member, you'll be held liable. A professional who comes across any girl who is gone through FGM under 18 years has a mandatory duty to report. And most importantly, we also have a protective factor where if you see a girl who is at risk under 18, you can then report and take up a court order for that girl to be protected and not taken out of the country. The flip side of this has been that for a lot of communities, girls who are under 18 who have been affected by FGM are not able to seek services. Because once you seek a service, you will be automatically reported. So again, the whole backlash is this girl is not being protected because she needs additional health problems that may be associated with the fact that she's been through a female genital mutilation. We do get calls. I mean, a most recent case. Yeah, go on. Jenny, go on.
Is it right to say that FGM runs through the culture? How can the culture change around FGM moving forward?
A big issue is it is not an individual practice. It's done because a particular ethnic community values FGM as a way of preventing girls from being sexually promiscuous. Sometimes they even say it's a religious obligation. In a study that we did in London with men, and this is where men come in, a lot of men were not aware of the practice being done for their daughters because they were not involved in decision making. Most importantly, we also see that for the men, they don't understand the details of what's been done to their daughters or their wives. What we found was that where men found it was a religious obligation, they were more than 10 times more likely to do it. So sometimes it's linked to religion, it could be linked to culture. The only way to address the culture is to engage with communities through community engagement, through working with influencers who can break the cycle. And a lot of these influencers, some of them could be professionals, could be religious leaders, could be traditional leaders. But in the UK, where a father is very clear that FGM should be stopped, it can stop within the family. So we know that we need to engage all critical players, particularly grandmothers, because grandmothers know the see the practice. Yes.
Who plays the biggest part? Grandparents or the men within our community when it comes to FGM?
Again, it depends on different communities. So again, there isn't a uniform thing around which one, but in some communities, you'll find that men don't take part in the decision making at all. In other parts, you'll find that it's the women, particularly the grandmothers, who want to make sure that their grandchildren are supposedly safe and are good women. So without going through it, you can't become a good woman. So that issue of being a good woman is so important. And of course, marriageability is the biggest challenge in our community. So it's like, if you haven't been through it, you're not marriage material. So if you're not marriage material, it's in the interest of the family to ensure that their daughters are marriage material. So that is also the biggest challenge.
Okay. So the elders within the family are making those decisions.
Yes. But we're also seeing that for a lot of women, they have actually started to use the law. So they are seeing that if the law is protective, then they will go all out to say, I can protect my daughter, or I have the backing of the law to be able to protect my daughter. And unfortunately, in some cases, it's also gone underground. And this is the type of practice where you cannot assess when it's been done or where it has been done. So we do need to work towards strengthening learning, particularly with young women, because young women in the home know when their siblings are at risk. How do you work with younger women, younger siblings, to be able to protect their siblings within the home? How do you work with parents? How do we work with mothers? Because some of the mothers know that they've been through FGM. They've gone through all the psychological and health challenges and really don't want that to happen to their daughters. Incidentally, one of the things that was a big factor back home in countries of origin, when a woman goes to have a baby, a father is not allowed into the maternity ward during delivery. In the UK, men are supposed to and actually enabled to be with their wives when they are delivering. So we are seeing men now are actually seeing the impact of FGM, particularly with their wives when they are delivering. That is shifting. So that is a major change factor also for men.
So whilst we are talking here on FGM, thank you so much, Nana. I'm going to bring in Angie Marriott.
Good morning, Jenny. Can you hear me?
Morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And I'd just like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to come on the show and to speak about a very passionate, important subject that I've been involved in for a long time. I qualified as a nurse in 1982 and from the late 80s became involved in domestic violence, also FGM. I know Nana very well. Good morning, Nana. A pleasure to see you campaigning to fight for our girls, stop them being cut. I've worked in prison for over 20 years supporting women who were victims of domestic violence. And certainly back in the day, we were campaigning. I was a trade union activist in Unison for 20 years for the change in the one-year rule of immigration and asylum rule, but also for the change in the law of provocation. There was many women in there in prison that I supported that had killed partners in self-defense, you know, what we call a practice law, the slow burn reaction. A lot of my work is about prevention. I work as a gender-based consultant. I work on honour-based violence, forced marriage, FGM, modern slavery and trafficking. and with young people going into schools, county lines, gangs. And I'm doing a lot of work with Matthew Norford, who's somebody who suffered through that path, was groomed and recruited. And for me, it's very important to tackle things at grassroots level. I feel certainly during the lockdown that in terms of supporting young people, safeguarding for FGM, forced marriage, gangs, county lines, getting our young people to deliver drugs and being involved in violence like that has gone sort of off the radar. We're not even hearing, one of the things for me as a diversity consultant is that we're not even hearing the government mention Black and ethnic minority women in terms of domestic violence. Yes, we keep hearing that the cases have gone up, but we're hearing very little. I've not heard anybody talk about domestic violence from a Black perspective. And certainly for the work that I do, we have to look at domestic violence from a Black perspective and safeguarding very differently. I work with the police. I sit on Cheshire Police's Diversity and Inclusion Board, and I've been a critical friend to the police for 17 years. And in terms of that, that's a great partnership because the work that the police have done is really positive. Certainly from the days of Stephen Lawrence, the police have a very different mindset in looking at things. And I also do many lectures for young police students. But going back to the issues of forced marriage and FGM, we know that many of these are hidden underground. He was involved in the Shafilia Ahmed case, the murder of the 17-year-old girl in Warrington in Cheshire. I can hear a buzzing. Is it coming from my end? Sorry, I'll just turn the window. Sorry, Jenny, is that better?
No problem, that's much better. Thank you.
My husband to be started to trim the lawn.
Down in the garden.
Okay. Yes, so I think in terms of that, with the Shafilia Ahmed case, what we have to remember with forced marriage, honour-based abuse, families, perpetrators will go to all lengths to conceal, hide that crime. When I'm training, I always use the case of Banaz Mahmood, the young girl, the Iraqi Kurdish girl from the West Midlands, who was a victim of forced marriage when she came here to escape the regime of Saddam Hussein. When she left that abusive marriage that she was forced into, she met a new partner, and that was certainly frowned upon by her family in the name of so-called honour. The family believed that brought shame to the family and community. She was raped and murdered by her father and two cousins. And I think that's a very important case, the case of Banaz Mahmood, because it showed she'd contacted the police on several occasions, and at one point she was arrested and accused of being dramatic. She wrote to the police and said she was in fear of her life, and nothing was done. And a week later she disappeared, and her body was found several weeks later in a garden in a freezer. And I think in terms of that changed the way that policing of honour-based violence with the ACPO strategy, but we've still got a long way to go. With lockdown, we know that all the issues that are pressing issues, I work with lots of NGOs, African Women Northern Ireland, I'm working on a modern slavery project out there. But in terms of that, we're missing that focus. The case of Banaz, the case of Shafilia shows the lengths that communities will collude to commit that murder, abuse a woman behind those scenes. And certainly with the years that I've been a critical friend to the police, I've been involved in many cases. And women are suffering out there, and a small percentage of men, because we mustn't forget that can also be the victims. But women, our Black women, minority ethnic backgrounds, are suffering in silence. It's a taboo to access help, to even mention that. And we know from research done, and I did my master's thesis on honour-based violence, forced marriage, FGM, how I could improve that journey for victims and improve the way that the police support women. And in terms of that, it showed that Black women do not report domestic violence because of the taboo, because in our culture, in many cultures, my father was Nigerian, it's acceptable. A man is allowed to beat a woman. And we've got to get that message there. And one of my passions is going into schools and speaking to young girls and young men about domestic violence, bullying, forced marriage, FGM, in terms of prevention, but also county lines, because what we're seeing now, I'm also a consultant for the Training Hub in Manchester, who offers a fabulous service for looked after children. So I train foster carers, residential care staff, but also looked after children too. And we're seeing a huge incidence in terms of violence with county lines, substance abuse, sexual exploitation, criminal exploitation of our young people, where they're being harmed. You know, here's £10, run that package up the road.
And unfortunately, are you finding due to COVID there's a raise? Because I know that our referrals for young people around CSE are very high, and a big part of our work is the safe space work. But as you've touched on the training around social services and foster carers, I want to bring in Dr. Diane Rennie, who has also founded Swim, but also in some of your work, there's a lot of work around training within children in care, abuse, emotional health and well-being, healthy relationships, peer pressure.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, thank you. It's just an honour to be on this panel this morning. And many of my previous panelists have spoken about such really key, important issues. For me, the reason why I set up Strength Within Me Foundation, which means SWIM, is because myself, who has survived a near murder attempt on my life, what it actually showed me was that when speaking to young girls in particular and boys, because we have to deal with both girls and boys, that it's learned behaviour. So we call it the intergenerational theory. And I thought, I don't want to keep having these discussions after the fact. It's about let's try and eradicate domestic abuse. So it's all about education. So I formed an APPG, an all-parliamentary group, and lobbied for a number of years to have healthy relationships taught in schools all over the UK. I'm happy to say that has come into effect and goes into all schools from September this year. But it's always the case, what does that then look like? You know, healthy teaching and having workshops about healthy relationships is one thing, but it's what does that then look like? It's not just a tick box exercise.
No, definitely not.
You know, and it's like 1 in 7 children either live in homes with domestic abuse or have experienced domestic abuse. If a woman is put into a shelter, 61.7% of them have their children in the shelter with them. The list of effects it has on the children go on from bedwetting to going into silence, not speaking. Some people have become mute because of the trauma. It just goes on and on and on. And when we looked at, even from a global perspective, financially, that, you know, the amount of children who are removed because of domestic abuse, before it had to be that they had been subject to domestic abuse themselves. That law changed, so it's just not just if they hear, even it's about if they hear domestic violence, they can be removed. That means then you're taking those children out of their environment, and I'm not saying that isn't the right step to make, putting them into foster care. A lot of the foster carers, so I also, like your previous panelist, they go into foster care, and they then are not identified of having any kind of counselling needs. And so it perpetuates. So unfortunately, we create victims or perpetrators. In our community, unfortunately, taking on what Lee said from the introduction of the show this morning, I know of many men in our community who are perpetrators. And many of us in the community know that they're perpetrators, but we say nothing. We do nothing. And that's where the problem really lies. If we as a community do not hold our men to account, then we've got a really serious problem. Because, as I said before, when I've gone into prisons, and a lot of the young men I deal with, when you speak to them, over 90% of them came from backgrounds where domestic violence was prevalent. And I say to people, if you're living in a household where all you see, the answer to everything is violence, why, when you step out of your house, is that not going to continue to be your answer? So
I did talk about this recently, Diane, when I was speaking about youth violence, and that we need to look at our young men individually, because some of their parents, sisters, mothers, grandparents may have been victims of abuse, whether it be domestic abuse, whether it be sexual abuse, whether it be within the family. And I do think that we really do need to start, you know, a lot of the time, schools, groups, we group up our young boys or we group up our young girls. But I also feel like you're saying there needs to be some individual work. And I know it looks like a big picture.
No, the point you're saying is, I think we as a community also have to not work in silos. We need to come together. I mean, to take this panel you have this morning, a wealth of knowledge over a serious breadth of different issues that come underneath the domestic violence banner. It's about us working together. And your previous question said, like, in our community, unfortunately, we still do not talk.
Yes.
You know, we still do not talk.
What do you think we can do about that, Diane? What do you think?
I think it's preventative. I think it's, obviously, it sounds like a cliche, but the young are the future. You know, they are. And I work from as young as year 6. And one of the workshops we do is so basic in a lot of ways, but it just reveals so much information. And we just have one board what says this is a healthy relationship, another board which says this is an unhealthy relationship, and then we have a number of statements, and we get the young people to pick a statement and put it under which board they think it should go. The amount of young people who put, it's okay to be hit, that shows that he loves me. It's okay that he calls me constantly 30 times. That's a healthy relationship. It's so not a healthy relationship. So it's about educating them, because if you're brought up in a household where domestic violence is your norm, that's your norm.
Yeah, and that will be the learned behaviour.
And it will continue.
Spoken about.
And it will continue. You know, it's like, if you think also the courts don't help. When they go into court, a lot of the times I worked on an awful case where domestic violence was rife. The mum got away, she got away with her children. But then how he then continued to emotionally abuse was via the children, you know, saying he wants visitation rights, etc. And the lady kept saying, no, this is a sense of control. It's still a sense of control. And they didn't listen to her. They said, no, he's still the father. He didn't physically abuse the children, even though he did emotionally. And the kids were made to see their father. And then, unfortunately, in 2018, she kept saying that she just felt there was something wrong. You know, sometimes as a mum, you have this gut feeling.
Yeah.
And he had unsupervised contact and killed both the children. And in court, he was so happy with his own children. He was so happy to see the emotional distress he had caused his wife, his ex-wife. So it's about us. When you think, I'm not saying, I think obviously when you're with your partners, disagreeing is fine.
Yes,
But then when children witness that level of violence, that level of consistent arguments, it only leads to one thing. And I'm not saying that everybody who's raised in a family where domestic violence is going on, that they're then going to necessarily be a victim and then they're necessarily going to be a perpetrator. But the stats are high.
Yeah.
So it's about preventative. For me, everything's about preventative. I am fed up attending case studies, case conferences to discuss what went wrong.
Yeah.
You know, we've had Baby P, we've had so many examples that we can learn from. And it's our responsibility to really bring our children up in safe havens. And people think that, you know, when they think about, social services, they think about neglect and all of these things. But no, you constantly arguing, you constantly showing an abusive behavior is just as damaging, if not more.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we have to really do something. And that's why I'm happy that now we're running lots of workshops. And, you know, unfortunately, in the COVID-19, we're a very small charity, but with big mouths. You know, we like to create noise and for people to recognize what's going on. We've gone from receiving 30 calls a week to over 200.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how heartbreaking it is to me to hear kids whisper down the phone saying, help me.
I was going to say,
no way to go. You know, you get that normal conversation. Oh, why didn't she just leave?
Yeah.
And I say, I'm not going to go into the psychological reason of why they don't just leave with you.
Of course.
But I deal with children. They can't just leave.
Yeah.
They're 7, 8, 12, 13.
How has COVID changed the way you're working? Because just like yourself, I'm a small organisation, but we work on referrals and have clients within school. We have clients that are not in school. And even for us, everything has gone.
Well, for us, for our organisation, it's difficult because obviously we do a lot of our work in schools. Yeah. So we've become a real kind of reactive. Yeah, because we're just dealing with the calls that come in, but
has
again,
support gone up for you?
Well, we do some. You know, a lot of us are trained psychologists, like myself. We try and emotionally set them paths of how they can protect themselves, but it's difficult because they're the children. They, you know, and about them wanting, when you speak to them, they do not want to phone the police on their parents. You know, they don't want to phone the police on their parents. And as they say, they're living with them. What are they going to do? Now, obviously, this has been heightened. The level of violence has been heightened because you might have somebody at home who's lost their job. They can't go out. The kids are under their feet 24/7. So it just heightens the level of violence. So we've actually become more reactive. Obviously, a lot of things for us have gone online. So we have online therapy sessions that we can speak to young people. We're developing an app, a very preventative app, even for people to be able to identify the signs that they may be living in a household with domestic violence. So we've
Definitely.
I've never been more busy, and it
Yeah, I agree.
absolutely, it just saddens me because we're dealing with, you know, in the last 3 weeks, 16 people have died due to domestic violence in 3 weeks. You know, people are not talking about this enough. But of those 16, what people don't know, 3 were children. They have lost their lives. So it's our responsibility, and it's all of us in the sense, if you're living next door to a household,
I was going to say,
where
what
you
do
hear,
what during COVID-19, more so than any other time, because we know that we should be alert and aware of what's going on around us all the time. But during COVID-19, more people are at home, more people are aware. What do you think the community needs to be looking for?
well, I
Or
think
listening out for?
I just think it's about, I think, you know, when you speak to people, I think Lee said on one of his shows, he's probably knows more about his neighbours than any time before. Yeah. And it's about, you know, people say, oh, I don't want to be a grass. No, be a grass, you know. And if you, and what I would say, there was a famous case in America, and her name just has left me for the moment, where a colleague, well, her colleague, she used to notice when she came into work, you know, would have a little bit extra makeup on, was a bit reserved, lot of little things. You know what she did? And they wasn't like close colleagues, but she'd got a diary. So I tell everybody, if you suspect something is going on next door to you, get a diary, just put times, dates, and just write what you heard. Because it was this diary in this case in America why her husband was convicted for so many years, because somebody had evidenced everything. And I think that's what you can do. And phone the police. I don't care. But if you have to call them 3 times a day, it's logged. Get your crime reference and log it.
Definitely.
And that's as much as you can do.
I think no one is too nosy, because I think my own teen unhealthy relationship experience was my nosy next door neighbour who actually called the police so many times. In the end, it had to get through to me. So you know what, I would join you on that and say no one is too noisy. You are saving potential lives, and that's how
exactly. And you have to think again, even if you don't see the kids looking bruised, or what they are going through psychologically, is
which
so
is what we can't
damning.
see.
I mean, my experience of domestic violence, I'm an educated woman, and I wasn't beating every day, I tell people, or anything like that. But the moment I said I wanted to leave is when he tried to kill me. He stalked me for years. He stalked me for years. And the psychological damage it did to me was profound. I remember when I was in Washington to speak to a bunch of women on this very said subject, domestic abuse. And I froze. I felt I was a fraud. I had imposter syndrome. I was just a mess. And I have to now keep checking myself and saying, no, this is not who you are. You are that beautiful Black woman. You are that woman who can achieve. And this is what we need to keep telling and building up in our young people so that they get to the point. And that's why we call the charity Strength Within Me, because it has to come from within. It has to become from within. And that's what we educate, that if they're in situations where they feel uncomfortable, that they feel confident enough to tell someone. And, you know, we talk about domestic, one of the biggest rising domestic violence is actual children being violent against their parents. There's a whole realm of things that we need to be talking about.
And that's very high for us at the moment. For myself and my organisation, parental abuse is very high, because, you know, we're going into what, 3 months of being locked down. Imagine parents who couldn't really have good conversations or communication loss with their children before this. You're now having to tell your child to stay home. You know, we've got parents who are high risk because they've been unwell, or they may have a series of illnesses, and young people are battling, parents are battling with their young people to stay home. Very, very difficult time.
Yeah. I mean, and one of the comments has said, you know, keep it on your phone, whether it's a phone diary, whether it's a physical diary, just note it. And that's what you need to do. You just need to note times, dates, and just put a brief description of what you heard or what you saw. And I don't think people realize how important. And I would just keep dialing the police and letting them know, and then getting my.
Yeah.
But so it helps.
Potentially, definitely, because potentially for someone who hasn't reported, the evidence that you're keeping will actually help them.
Yeah. And the thing is, that's for us as the neighbours. I think if you're in the household, there's a few apps which I can put up afterwards where it's invisible. Your history's invisible, your notes are invisible, where you can log everything yourself. But if you're a neighbour, log away, because you know, that will help the victim immensely. So I would just say to everybody out there, it's all of our responsibility. And I know we use that saying, it takes a village to raise a family. It truly does. It takes all of us.
Definitely.
All of us.
Diane, thank you. And you touched there on some apps and technology. So I'm going to say thank you. And we're going to go to Alyssa or Elsa. Elsa Gilliam.
Hello. Yes, it's Elsa. Thank you.
Elsa, hi. We touched there on videos online, and I'm just going to introduce you, an entrepreneur with a passion for leveraging technology to combat domestic violence and foster women's empowerment. You've founded Shiro Hub. So tell us a little bit about your educational video games, which Diane there touched on a few.
Sure. So absolutely. I have my own personal experience in domestic violence. I am also a domestic violence survivor. And a lot of what I experienced was the classic domestic violence experience, the gaslighting, starting with the honeymoon phase, moving to gaslighting, conditioning, boundary breaking, exercises by the abuser, and then it moved into the exit, where, as Dr. Diane said, the danger of leaving. And so my experience in general really gave me a very good insight for every aspect of domestic violence, and particularly my concerns were for my children. Now, we've heard a lot of people talking about the intergenerational impact of domestic violence, and we've seen a lot of comments in the chat as well about this. My concern for my children was twofold. I never wanted to have my future daughter-in-law come to me and say, your son is abusing me. And in exiting my situation, I realized that I had basically, in the 16 years of that abusive marriage, not realized that my ex was sculpting my children to be abusers and my daughter to be a victim. So for me, it was very important to first heal my children, and that's an ongoing activity. But then to figure out, leveraging my technology experience, my 20 years in running technology projects in banks, how could I leverage the scalability of technology to help other people, to help people wake up? As it can be very difficult to wake up from domestic violence and see what's actually happening to you. And then also to be able to raise awareness of resources and to be able to help people to understand the impact of their children. So I've created this corporation, this company called Shiro Hub. And what I do is I create video games that teach the warning signs of domestic violence, teach awareness of it, teaching the manipulation and control, and also that talks to what is the impact to the children. And I think, to just talk a little bit more about that, it's not even just that the children are impacted to potentially become abusers and victims in their lifetime. But there are actually studies out there talking about epigenetics. There's evidence that, you know, we pass down stress from our generation to other generations as well through our genes. And I was actually part of a study in the United States on that about 15 years ago. So, you know, it's very important that we find ways to prevent domestic violence. And I'm very excited to hear about Dr. Diane's app and all the work that she's been doing in schools. And my goal also is to use technology to prevent domestic violence.
And I think it will be very much welcomed. I mean, it's not that easy, and I don't know if when we come to the questions a little bit later on, we're going to talk about that. But it took quite a few years for even my organisation to get into schools, and I'm so grateful that we've got into schools ranging from 11-year-olds up. It's not easy to get into schools. It would have been nice to have someone from education in the room so we could actually ask a few questions around that. But we do know, you know, Diana said that she's also going to be going into schools, and a lot of her work is in schools, and I think that that's great, because I think
likewise
that's
I've been very fortunate actually to get experience in schools. So I was brought in to work with about 50 odd children in New York. So I think you're aware that I've part of my domestic violence story was actually I was trapped in New York basically for the last 20 years. I have children with the abuser and couldn't leave. And so New York has been my home for a long time. And I was able to roll out a version of the game in a number of schools in New York, middle and high schools, and got an amazing reaction from the children. This was really a very early pilot. And so it was under the guise of getting their feedback in order to shape the game. And, you know, from this point, what's next for my American high school game is to do a study on it and to get a formal study written up. But my game has largely been focused towards children. So I have a team that I'm working with in South Africa on a culturally, linguistically, and visually relevant game for there. But things have morphed with what I'm doing to also have a version for adults in Haiti. So a lot of what I do is very much focused on things, games being visually, linguistically, and culturally appropriate. I think one thing that really became very obvious to me is I couldn't take a game that was crafted for people in America or people in the UK and try to touch people's hearts in Haiti. It doesn't work from a language perspective, and it doesn't work visually. So for me, it's all about touching the heart so that they can hear the message via a narrative-based game, and you are able to really reach people in that way if you provide them with a medium that looks normal to them. But go ahead.
Sorry, how do you feel the work differs from what we're doing here around domestic abuse and what's happening in the US?
Well, I don't feel that there is a significant amount of difference. If you look at it depends on the state in the US, right? So very much, I was incredibly blessed to have experienced everything that I experienced in New York, which was one of those. It's one of those states that is pretty supportive. It really depends on which judge you're dealing with and who you encounter. But there are some things that I note about England that are more progressive. You know, I literally cried when I saw that the UK was putting in place a law that recognized emotional abuse. You know, to try to explain that to a judge in the States, you're wasting your time. If you don't go with bruises and you don't go with some kind of physical evidence, then good luck to you, you know? And that's also a part of where I see my business going, actually, where I see my social impact project is facilitating communication in a community-based game across the globe is my dream. I have people in Malaysia wanting me to make a game, I'm making a game for Haiti. I'm working with people in South Africa. I've got a version in German, Switzerland. And my dream really is to be able to take all of these versions and create a global game that facilitates communication between somebody in Haiti and somebody in the UK, so that that person in Haiti can say, whoa, hold on a second. You've got law in the UK that recognizes emotional abuse, and I can't even get the policeman to take my report when I was just raped. So I think
that'd be really, really valuable, especially for young people. I've found with myself that I invested in a film, a healthy relationship film based around a team relationship.
Yeah.
And I just find that young people are more prone to open up conversation when they see something or when they're playing a game. And I think it's going to be vital as we move forward that using technology, as we've all had to change the way we work during COVID-19, shows that technology can take us tenfold ahead.
Yeah, I mean, who could have foreseen this? But in creating something out of my corporate passion for technology, it is definitely time. COVID-19 has made it very obvious that this is absolutely the time to leverage technology. It was anyway, from the scalability perspective. I mean, part of my master's thesis is looking at the individual. Yes, I hear a lot of feedback. Looking at the individual projects that people do, where an NGO may go into a country and work on domestic violence there, and so essentially, if you take technology, you can really scale what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Now I am aware of the time, and I can see I am clock watching, even though questions and comments that I've seen coming up. So thank you very much to everyone who is locked in on all the different platforms. We do see you're going to come to you. We've got one more as per Lee's request. Thank you so much, Elsa, for giving us some updates on the apps. I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about that, and I'm going to make sure that I keep your contact details when I'm ready. We're going to go to David Mullins.
Good morning. Hi, Jenny. All right, so Jenny.
Hi, David.
Okay, Jenny's frozen, so I take it I should just introduce myself. My name's David Mullins, and I am the founder of an organization called Father Figure. And just to tell you a little bit about the work we do, the organization was started I started my work, I should say, about 14 years ago. And about 7 years in, having had quite a few experiences of working with men, I realized that domestic abuse was quite a prevalent subject. And so I sought to get some training on the subject, and have been doing different various bits of work around domestic violence with men in various ways for the last 7 years. And it's not lost upon me that I am the only male on this panel. And I think, having heard some of the stories we've heard today, it does really give me a real sense of just feeling that I have a great responsibility as a man, and especially as a Black man, on this subject to continue the work, but to also support others to do so as well. I want to just congratulate all the previous speakers that have been on so far. I'm very privileged to be on such a panel. We've heard a lot about abuse, domestic violence and abuse, and I'm glad and happy to hear that a few of the speakers have spoken about what they're doing with men as well as women. And I think for me, it's really important that we do work and support men who are perpetrators of abusive behavior. When I first started my work, I had an attitude of, because I support men in family court as well, I had an attitude that I would never support a guy in the through the family court who has got any history of domestic violence or abuse. And I did change my decision having started to work with abusive men, because I thought if I didn't help, if someone like myself and other organizations were not supporting men to change their behavior, then who will? We must support women who are victims of abuse. Okay. But if we do not support the men, then all we are doing is pushing the problem to somewhere else. And it will be my sister, your daughter, once we've got this person to leave this abusive man. And so for me, I felt that it was really important that we have some kind of service and services that also support men. And it's not for everyone, because I train social workers, I do training with professionals, and I see it all the time. It's very hard if you are someone who has experienced this behavior to then go and in your professional capacity sometimes and have to support this same man with any empathy. And it's something that I've had to learn how to do. I've had to take myself on a journey. It's not behavior that I'm familiar with and agree with, but I've had to learn how to be non-judgmental in the way that I support these men to try and help them to change their behavior. I think it's really important that this conversation is had again and again, and it becomes a normal conversation for all the reasons we've heard, that it's not spoken about, it's not reported. I feel like men do not understand what abuse is, but I also feel like women don't understand what abuse is in many cases as well. So, obvious, and what I would say is rip up whatever you've got in your mind of what an abuser looks like, because he doesn't look like that. He might look like that, but as it was, who spoke first? Was it Alison? Alison, really bad name. Sorry, Alison. But as Alison,
okay. There's been a few guests, so
she had an upstanding look guy. Someone I saw in the comments talking about abuse in church. I have coined a saying, and this will make me very unpopular, but I'm not here to make friends, and I'm not really looking for any new friends, so I'm all right with that one. I have a saying which says that I believe that all men within intimate relationships have displayed some form of abusive behavior at some stage, whether it's in their current relationship or a previous one, and to the different levels. So, most men will be, I've worked with guys who, I've been in a room with men who have nearly killed women, to a guy who's never touched a woman. And one of the things I say is that, you be in this room for what you're in the room for. Don't worry about the guy on the other side of the room. And I do get people who disagree with that comment, male and female. And the example I give, or the question I ask, is if you've never sulked, please raise your hand. If you've never ever sulked, raise your hand. I've only had one guy on it, well, I think it was on a radio interview, try to say he's never sulked, and I didn't waste much time speaking to him. But the fact is, sulking, if used regularly to get what you want, is an abusive behavior. It's an invisible line of control. I don't have to touch you. I don't have to swear. I don't have to shout. I don't have to threaten you. I just sulk. I just be non-existent for the next day or two. And then, when you cook my favorite dinner, then I start to become friendly again with you as my wife or my partner. So we need to be having more conversations, men especially. My experience is that men collude. You go in the barbershop and you might say something, them woman, they blah, blah. And it's just colluding. No one's calling you out. No one's calling men out on these behaviors that are abusive. I don't have abusive friends, not that I know of. And if they are abusive, I will call them out on it.
Can I ask you something, David? In with the work that because I can see that there's quite a few comments around, and we talk a lot about men not owning up to their responsibility, men being quite abusive when they haven't realized they've been abusive. But there's a big conversation that was touched on a little bit by Alsa. We talked about narcissism, and we don't hear about narcissistic behavior. I've seen a comment in the group, and we're touching on women and men and narcissistic behavior. Have you worked with men who have discussed openly women being narcissistic within their relationships?
Most definitely, because I mean, a piece of the work that I do is supporting men to go through the family court process to regain access to children. Now, Diane has rightfully made reference to that being, that is a very dangerous piece of work, because I know that I get a lot of men who come to my organization for help and they're abusers. And I thank God for my experience in my field, because I know that there are loads of other McKinsey Friend Services who have, and solicitors and lawyers who will just take your money. It's a job, and their job is to get you across that finishing line and get you to win. And I do not take that approach. For any work I do, the child is my client. And for anyone who's used my service, they will be able to testify that that is the first thing that I will say, that you are not my client, the child is my client. Yes, you may be paying me, but your money's not important. My integrity, my morals are much more important. And if I have a client where I know he's been abusive and I feel that the things that he is saying to me, and I can smell it because I've been in this field, I know it. You may not even realize that you're saying things to me that are red flags. And so I get those red flags really quickly. And I will then say that, well, actually, I think you need to go on a perpetrator program. And in fact, I know the court will ask you to anyway. But how do you feel about that? And if a guy's saying to me, no, well, that's where I will then step off and say, well, I can't support you. You'll need to go through that process, because I'm not willing to be part of that. But yes, I have had men who have talked about, yes, women being narcissistic with their behavior. And one of the things I say to men is that, look, it's not our job to control women. It's not my job to control my wife. It's my job to have a healthy relationship. And guess what? If you have got a narcissistic partner, child, mother of your child, then you need to probably think about how that relationship continues, if it should continue. If you cannot live with that narcissistic behavior, then you should leave. You should not try to stay and control who that person is, because let's get this out there. The basis of abuse is control. For those who don't understand it and don't really get it, it's control. So anything that I do that tries to control what you do is abuse. If I want you to do something for me, Jenny, we need to come to a consensus. We need to have a conversation. If you don't want to do it, yes, I might try to persuade you, but hey, there's a thin line between being coercive and us coming to an agreement. Like, we can agree to disagree. You don't want to do that. I might say, Jenny, please, I need 2 more minutes. Come on, please. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. I have to agree to that. And so for men who are in these relationships, here's one of the other things I hear all the time. She knows how to push my buttons. She knows how to trigger me. Well, if you've got someone who makes you feel that way, you need to decide whether or not it's the right relationship for you. It's not about, oh, it's her fault. Because what perpetrators do is they deny, they minimize, and they blame.
Yeah. So as someone who works with male perpetrators on a one-to-one basis, what can we do as a community to make sure that us as women and men come together and talk about this openly and honestly? Is it that there should be set piece of work for men, a set piece of work for women, and then we come together? Should it be a conference where we have men in one place, women in another, and then later on in the evening we all come together and talk openly about solutions?
I think there's no reason why there can't be a combination. I do think that men, my experience of men, and I never like to tarnish anyone with any one brush, especially being a black man. However, I've worked with men for 14 years, and what I do know is that we have an issue with our egos and our masculinity, and so some of those conversations do need to be had in private. Some of those do need to be had without women present, for you to be able to give you that opportunity to climb down off that pedestal that you've put yourself on, where you don't believe that, yes, I might even be a deacon or a pastor or someone that's upstanding in my community, but actually, yes, my behavior is abusive. You may need to do that in a space where you feel safe. I've recently created a platform called Men Talking, the acronym being Men, Mental, Talking, and King. And that space over the last 8-9 weeks through COVID has been phenomenal. It's something that I'd never thought. We've got at least 20 men 20 to 30 guys on every week talking honestly. We've had men acknowledge that they have been abusers within their relationship. We've had men cry, and that doesn't happen. You know, black men in a space with other black men. Let's not even put a color on it. Men in a space with other men crying doesn't really happen. So we need to create areas and spaces for this to happen. I think women need to be able to be in their space as well, to understand what some of these behaviors are, because we just don't. We've normalized these behaviors so much that women are leaving men and going to other men and accepting these behaviors as that's just what men do. That's what men do, and not.
So we talked a lot. All of the speakers today have talked, we've talked about early intervention. I think that's something that we all share today. Mm-hmm. Everyone who's spoken right here. Within schools. Can you hear me, David?
Yes, I've got you again.
Running safe space within around the separate.
Jenny, I'm losing you or lost you.
Can you hear me?
I've got you back. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Most domestic abuse charities, some of the well-known big charities, only do work around women.
Yeah.
Some of the newer, smaller organisation, and I'm sure Dr. Rini may want to come back in on this as well. We are starting to open up working with young men. I myself know that I run safe space for young boys. How can we work together to make sure that we are early intervening?
So you have cut out, but to answer your question, I think just to say that father figure and father to father have just, this is the time we're announcing it, have come together to create a consortium of organizations called, and the consortium will be called Black Men Against Domestic Abuse. But we need to, I agree, and I'd obviously like to exchange and have the details of everybody on here and invite anyone who's listening to get in contact with father figure, father to father, or any of the other organizations on here. Yes, I'm happy to. I'm currently doing a couple of programs in schools as well with young men about fatherhood, which obviously we cover this type of conversation, this subject. But yes, we need to be working together and working to our strengths, because we all bring different things to the table. As I said, it's not lost on me. I don't know much other guys that look like me that are doing this work. And if you are listening, and if you know anyone who does this work, I'm happy to hear from them so that we can build on this, because I can't do it all myself. I can't be everywhere. I'm sitting here in my office in my back garden, which is where I spend most of my time, but I can't do it on my own. And so I'm happy to partnership work with organizations who share the same vision.
Fantastic information there. I'm excited about this consortium, David, between you and Father to Father and Hackney. And you know what? We need more of that kind of pioneering work to allow men the space and the opportunity to begin to heal ourselves. And we do need healing. And I think much of your commentary and work is to be commended with Courtney Brown and others. And it's really critical mental health first aid intervention, in my view.
Agreed. And I'm looking forward to the work. And just to reiterate, the space for men, it's never been more needed. It's never been more needed for men to have a space to speak freely. You know, when we look at the week, in my background, I've got CNN on. I've had CNN on for the whole of yesterday, and when you look at what we are seeing in the media and how we are dealt with as men anyway, okay, and it's difficult to deal with. We wear masks on a daily basis, but equally we have to accept our responsibility for the behaviors that we are perpetuating within our communities. We have to take responsibility, but we're not going to do that by just chucking stones. One of the things I say to all my clients, I don't care what religion you are, is I quote the scripture from the Bible saying, who hasn't sinned should throw the first stone. And if you don't have that approach to dealing with perpetrators, then all the work that all these people have spoken about, all this fantastic work, all you're going to be doing is putting plasters on breaks. Yeah, because these men are going to be going somewhere else and picking up someone else's child. And that's why the early intervention is so important, so that children actually, because children have a great knack of holding their parents to account and saying, hey, hold on a minute, I learned this at school today. Is that right? And that's why early intervention is also important, because children can teach us. As if you're a parent, you will know that children teach you. They never stop teaching you. And so, it's all very important.
Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings comes great wisdom.
That's right.
What I wanted to do is I just wanted to bring back Alison, because one thing we haven't touched on is the church, and I've seen it in the comments, and I know that Alison is a minister.
Hi, yes. Well,
hi, Alison. I wanted to bring you back in because we've had I'm really trying to jot down. I can see the if you see me doing this, you know that someone's put something, a question. But we've spoken, there's been a few comments in the chat around how can we get more involved.
Jenny, you're gone again.
Yeah, more involved. Get the church more involved in what we're doing in relation to tackling this issue.
Well,
definitely.
I think the key thing in getting the church more involved is for the church to actually admit it's a problem. Because the church does not, unfortunately, and I say this as a minister, I say this as someone, I was raised in church. So I say this as someone that, I'm not bashing the church, but we need to recognize in the church that this is a problem. We also need to recognize in the church that, unfortunately, there are ministers who are the perpetrators of this. And it's a lot of the times when we have parents that trust these ministers, so they're sending their children off to church or these programs in church. Keep an eye on your children. Know who your children are communicating with. Know who your children are coming to contact with. Notice any changes in their behavior, regardless of whether that person you have sent them off with is a minister or not. And so that is where it starts. We have to really address this. We have to listen to people and not sweep it under the carpet as if to say, well, this is the church, this doesn't happen. Prime example of this, look at the Catholic Church. Look at how the lid has been blown wide open on the Catholic Church and the systemic abuse that has been going on for years. We need to learn lessons from that. Listen to our children, keep an eye on our children, and then really take it from there. And the truth is, if you're not getting church help from in the church, then you may need to step outside and go outside of the church and get help from one of the organizations spoken about by some of the wonderful panelists on here today. But the key step with the church, recognizing and admitting that there is a problem and there has been a problem.
Fantastic. Agree.
Absolutely. And we'd like to thank you, our dear sister Alison, because you gave us powerful testimony in the first part of the program, and I know the strength it takes to recount one's life experience. It doesn't come without personal toll. You do so because you're a public service leader, and we thank you for your public service. But at the same time, we want to make sure that you understand that we love and appreciate your contribution here today.
In his mixing part, so what I will say, I want to thank
Got
you.
a bit of a remix there, Alison.
Right? I just want to thank you for inviting me on this panel because, as I had mentioned in the very beginning, it hadn't been easy for me to come forward and speak about it. Hence, my book not even being in my own name because I was hiding behind it. So thank you for allowing me to just be able to share. And I'm really hoping that by people having a look at me to say, well, you know something, she kind of looks like she's doing okay. So I can speak about this. There's people I can go to. And so if my story can help even just one person, then it hasn't been in vain. So thank you.
Most definite. Thanks so much. Are you doing that?
I think Lee's mic's gone. He's gonna probably not come back on.
Wow, so David, I think it's just between you and I. So
Well, I want to say thank you for sharing what you shared, because it was very powerful. And even though I've been doing my work for 7 years, obviously, you know, I seldom hear the story from the mouth of the victim. You know, I get the story on a piece of paper, and obviously that's impactful, but never so impactful as you and or the victim speaking about it. And it just really reinforced the importance of the work that I have to do, that needs to be done. So yeah, no, thank you for sharing. It's very, very important.
you're very welcome. And just going back to what we were saying about education and our young people, I'm thinking to myself, if after I had suffered abuse at the hands of my best friend's dad at 15, if I had someone to speak to, if I had someone to go to reach out to, then maybe I wouldn't have fallen into an abusive relationship when I was 21. You know, so we need to talk to our daughters to let them know that, look, if and our sons, because, you know, let's not be like, let's not live in an ivory tower to say that our sons are not being abused. It's just a case of, let's speak to our children and let them know and let them feel comfortable coming to us, so that we can know that, look, if we can, like, as they say, bend the tree when it's young, then a lot of experiences that we went through as adults, our children don't need to go through those things if we are just open and if we are honest with them and give them that environment where we can just make them know that, look, there's no judgment here, there is no shame here. Because to be honest with you, sometimes I still feel like I carry it like it was my fault. Like I did this, I allowed this. How, you know, I'm this person that I would fight anybody, I'd cuss anybody. How did I allow a man to manipulate me, to control me, to abuse me?
Yeah.
So we also need to get rid of all of those things and just allow our children to be able to come to us. And the work that you're doing with educating men and men looking at themselves, they can then have conversations with their sons.
Exactly.
Like father to father figure, and not just their biological sons, because there's a lot of blended families as well. So men need to have conversations with sons, whether it's their own sons, just have conversations with young people. Women, we need to have conversations with I don't have any biological daughters, but my goodness, I have godchildren, I have nieces, I have children that I can speak to, that I can just let them know, look, I am here. You don't have to suffer, and you don't have to suffer in silence.
And you know, because we are so uneducated, I feel like, you know, for those who are listening and, you know, not really understanding what coercive abuse and control is and things like that, educate yourself with your children. So ask your child, do you know what coercive control is? Male or female, do you know what that is? And actually learn together. Because what you might realize is that actually you've been using that behavior and you didn't even realize. One of the things I'll just final thing I say, one of the things I say to men, and this is always gets a light bulb moment, especially the men who have daughters. The question I ask is, would you be happy if your daughter brought you home? Someone just like you. Would you be happy? Would you be happy with that? And if you wouldn't be, because this is where you got guys who you know, they don't want to really accept their behavior. If you wouldn't be, and I even give them the privilege of not even answering the question. You don't even have to answer that question. But if you wouldn't be happy, then you need to ask yourself why, and you need to think about what is the behavior that you need to change. Because it was mentioned, I think it was mentioned by you, Alison, about how, you know, you would want someone to treat your daughter.
Exactly. And where that came from, I remember many years ago when I lived in London, in the UK, I was walking to Shepherd's Bush station, and the one on the Metropolitan line, I was walking up the stairs, and the way this man called out to me, I was so almost like incensed, like, hold on a second. And I remember I spun on my heels, I walked down the stairs, and I said to him, speak to me the way you want somebody to speak to your daughter, your sister, your mother, your auntie. And he looked so contrite and he said, sis, you're right. I'm sorry. Good morning. And I said, good morning. And I walked back up the stairs. And I mean, this was like almost 30 years ago that I did this. And this made me stop and think that, hold on a second. That's the key that a lot of men are missing here. They're not seeing women as somebody's child, somebody's daughter, the way they have a daughter. And as I said earlier, I said, children do not do what they are told. They don't do what you say. They do what you do.
That's right.
They do what they
Okay, well, we're going to bring this boat
Thank you
into
so
the
much.
harbour. It's getting close, perilously close to 12.
The time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
and I wanted
we're going to say goodbye to our
thank
panelists.
everyone, Lee.
I'm going to say goodbye to our panelists, and it's just you and me, my dear, to wash up at the end of the show.
Good. I just wanted to say
insight.
thank you to everyone.
Yeah, well, the technology is playing with us this morning, but we do deeply thank each and one of our hosts individually for what has been a brilliant show. And
so much knowledge, information, education, a wealth.
It's been incredible. I hope people are taking that away from you. If you're watching the show and you want to share it later on, we'd be grateful for that as you put it around. But Jenny Steele has been a fantastic host, darling. It's been an absolute joy this morning. Thank you so much for sharing the time with us.
It so has. No, thank you. I can see a conference building from this.
Absolutely. And I love the T-shirt. Love doesn't hurt.
Thank you. It's one of the domestic violence UK tops that they sell on their website. They're unfunded. They don't get grants. So they look towards selling a lot of T-shirts, bags, that type stuff. So the details are online, but you can come and find me and find out more information about them. And they're available for men and women and children.
I'm definitely going to get one because I love that. And the comment that was made earlier on, about saying to men, would you bring you home? Would you be glad to see you being brought home? I thought that was so apposite because, I'm always trying to tell my daughters that, I try and be the example of the man I want you to settle down with. And their comment always back to me is, a man has to measure up to you, Dad. And I think that's the role that a father should have, to set the standard, that you don't settle for anything than a man like me. And
definitely.
And so on. So, Jenny, we're going to say goodbye, my darling.
Thank you so much.
To your lovely summer weekend. What are you doing? Anything nice?
Would have been coming in with
it's such a challenge. This new technology is driving us mad. Jenny, I'm going to say goodbye. It's just a curse this morning. I've no idea. It's going in, it's coming out. We're freezing. But I think we got through with the help of our panelists. And what great panelists we had. I mean, I think Alison, I've got to have her back as co-host a show with me. I think she could literally host her own show. Not to say that Dr. Diane Riney, Alison, all our guests, David, Nana, Alisa, I mean, they've all just been absolutely phenomenal. And I thank them from the bottom of my heart for coming on this platform and getting this issue out to you. As men, we have to take fundamental responsibility. We can't keep sweeping these issues underneath the carpet. I don't want my daughter meeting guys who are failing to be emotionally intelligent, fail to tackle their own trauma. And let's face it, we've all had trauma. I've had trauma. Everybody has suffered trauma in some way. And we heard from Alison. And look what a beautiful individual Alison has come. Dr. Diane Riney, again, victim. Jenny Steele, again. So these are survivors of domestics for you. So if you're going through it, I hope these women give you the kind of inspiration and hope to get the access to the support you need. And for Black men, first of all, to applaud the younger generation, because as Jenny Steele said, they are emotionally intelligent and making a difference in breaking that chain. To men of a certain age, to be a strong man, you need to be an emotionally intelligent man. We don't always get there, and I'm a work in progress in relation to that. So I'm not talking to you from any high moral plane, but I am saying to you that heal thyself, physician. Look in the mirror. It all starts with you. And to those out there who continue to play the lie of presenting themselves as leading figures and committed progressives and community activists who's behind the scenes are engaging in the kind of behavior that we've heard all to today. You're living a desperate lie, and your toxicity continues to poison our community. Well, it's coming up to 12 o'clock next week. In fact, I'm not even sure what the show is next week. I think that we're doing education, but we've got some great programs coming along. Black Sox Global is going to be doing some fantastic international programs to bring you cutting edge debate from the international African diaspora. I can see Julie J. Charles is following me today. I said hi to her on a podcast I did earlier this morning, and she's still with me as we come to 12. And she's an NHS director, I think, and has got great contacts in relation to helping in regards to some of the work that we spoke about. So Julie will be definitely having a conversation, and thanks for your continued patronage. Now, as I say, these programs they're not clickbait. They're not the kind of thing that is going to see racks of numbers coming up. We've all know how easy it is to make a program that is that controversial, that it gets all the clicks. It's not clicks, it's quality. Quality is what we're after. And if you're sharing this program with others to promote discussion amongst other black men, if you're signposting resources for women and for men to get access to support, if it's resonating with you and you're coming back next week, if you join us here at Black Sox, www.blacksox.com, sign up for the program. Youth leadership development through our leadership mentoring program. Business consortia working together, bringing black organizations to work together on a grassroots level in order to raise the bar for the entire community. Ethical leadership, so that we're transparent in our leadership. Stew for self, so that we're economically independent. I'd like to thank our sponsors this morning, which is Black Sox and Section 109 Media, and of course, MediaNet Live TV, without whom all the platforming and bringing in of the guests and the studio handling through 30 Ambrose could not be possible. If you want to advertise on MediaNet Live TV, and it's one of the growing independent platforms for the black community out there, along with HMP TV, another Black Sox media platform, then get online, talk to him on Facebook, get your program online. You're in lockdown. What else are you doing? I hope you enjoy this weekend. I hope you enjoy this program. This is Lee Jasper signing out for this Saturday's Lee Jasper Drive Time. Share the program, spread the knowledge, keep the face.
Hi, my name's Lee Jasper. This is Brixton, London, and you're watching Lee Jasper Drive Time.